path of least resistance is the path of most resistance, by Robert Fritz. Narrated by Rosalind Fritz. Too often, people misunderstand the title of my most famous book, The Path of Least Resistance. They think I'm talking about the easiest way out, to minimize obstacles, to go with the flow. After all, one meaning of the phrase is exactly that. But I was describing a principle from physics, that energy flows along the path of least resistance, and that the underlying structure will determine that path. In other words, the structure of anything will determine its behavior. Sometimes the path of least resistance leads to difficulties which, while challenging, is where the energy is easiest to go. And the underlying structure in play will determine that path. Right now, in America, the Trump government is attempting to change the underlying structure of our Constitution and our way of life. The goal is to assert executive power over every aspect of American life. There are dimensions and levels of this assault on our values and system. With a weak Congress and politically biased Supreme Court, many of the formative structural principles of the founding of the nation have been ignored or, in some cases, violated. Structural change is the goal. In the end, if they have their way, the Trump approach will limit true democracy, assuring that the majority does not rule. Then power is centralized in the hands of a small group of authoritarians. Some of this is done in the name of Christian nationalism, the idea that the state should enforce a fundamentalist view on politics, culture, and civil society. This rationale is simply a way of trying to justify tyranny, as if you are doing it in the name of the Lord. And there are some zealots who are gullible to this rationale. But the true motivation has little to do with religious extremism. It is simply a power grab. With the thuggish behavior of ISIS invasions of cities run by Democrats, the strategy was to divide ethnic groups into us against them. Immigrants, either legal or not, were to be seen as the enemy. The subtext of white supremacy was never far away. Perhaps if the majority saw the ICE agents as the champions of a race war, the power grab could work. The majority would accept the assertion of authority, and one major step in the endeavor to establish central authority would be set in place as a foundation for other critical steps in restructuring the American Constitution. But the scheme didn't work. The majority did not fall prey to subtext of racism. There is something in the American spirit that deplores a bully, that instinctively wants fairness and justice, that rejects brutality. Yet there is little one can do until election time comes around. That is why protests are essential in mass numbers. There is a point where even the most authoritarian governments are subject to the will of the masses. Trump's predisposition has always been push harder, never retreat, never apologize, never back down. Instead, double down, become more tenacious, force the issue. So there are two major forces in play and in conflict. The quest for authoritarian takeover against the salvation of the beautifully designed democratic structure of the Constitution. The term that has come to oppose oppression is resist. And much like the French resistance during World War II, it is a noble cause. At its best, democracy is a collective creative process. But it is only possible within the right structure. To support that structure, the path of least resistance is the path of most resistance to Trump and his followers. It has been inspiring to see ordinary people face cold weather, face ICE agents' tear gas and smoke bombs, wearing masks to hide their identity, while they carry assault weapons that they point at the protesters. For the protesters, given the underlying structure, the path of least resistance is the path of most resistance.